I think my biggest concern as a citizen or a person would be economic impact, potential loss of a whole culture down in the bayous, and a very vibrant, important, very place-specific culture, very marine-oriented culture. And then the concern that I'm starting to have more and more now is with the sea turtle issue. There was just an NPR report that came out today that I haven't had even time to read. All I read was the headline, and it quoted some very reputable sea turtle biologists that we've both worked with. And the number of distressed or dead turtles in the last, what did it say, in the last week? In the last week has been more than were in the whole first 3 months of the spill. The numbers have suddenly skyrocketed.
Any reason?
Well, I think one of the things that Jay Wallace was saying is that you do have to take into account that there's more eyes out there and there's more people looking. So that's going to inflate your numbers a little bit, but it's probably not enough. It could be dispersant. It could be that whatever impacts were cumulative in the population, and it's reached some critical level. I don't think we're going to know, but I think it's really...
Turtles swim slower than fish. I mean, fish can faster to get out of the zones.
It could be that. It could be one of my personal theories, having been out there now for 8 days on the water and 3 days in the air, is the sargassum has a lot of foam in it. And I'm not saying it's dispersant, but I don't know what it is. I do know that turtles often tend to aggregate in sargassum lines and convergence lines.
Climb up there and rest? Or
no, they feed in what accumulates
under. Nursery.
Yeah, it's a nursery. It's an ecosystem. It's a floating ecosystem in the ocean, and one of the species that's attracted to that ecosystem is some sea turtles. And so, if residual oil and dispersant is aggregating in these convergence zones where the sargassum is, and that's also where the larvae is and where the turtles are coming, it might be that you're seeing a concentration. I don't know. That needs to be investigated, but it's a good question. I think it to me, the order of magnitude of what the impacts might be to the Gulf populations, which particularly Kemp's, Ridley, and loggerheads are so endangered, is that the nesting beaches, the females always come back to the same nesting beaches. So, and when the hatchlings hatch, they imprint on that beach. We don't really know how, but they do, and then eventually they come back. The fact that we know that as biologists, and yet we still as a community have agreed that it makes sense to move so many of those nests to a different...
I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
How do you move?
I can speak to that. Sure. I spoke with some scientists at the Moog Marine Lab in Sarasota, and what they said when I asked them that question was that they think that they imprint to the beach in the first third of when they're in the sand. Right after they're laid. So what they're doing is they're leaving the nests intact for as long as they possibly can, and then moving them.
But they're also moving them with their natal sand.
Yes, with their natal sand.
With sand.
Yes, but they feel that it's a process of time. So it's not that they imprint after they're hatched and are running down to the water. They do it while they're still in the egg. But they don't know for sure. But in their minds, if they released all these turtles into the Gulf the way things are and just let it go, it could be a death sentence. With what Sam and I have seen recently, maybe it's not so much, but
it's not worth the risk.
Right. They had to take their best shot, basically.
I believe some of them been on the east coast of Florida now,
yes.
Which is
Kennedy Space
They're never going to get around. I mean,
Well, no, they said that they do.
Really?
He said this is where they'd end up anyway. They come around into the Atlantic.
They cover huge amounts of
thousands
area.
and thousands of miles.
Yeah.
So they're thinking, if they leave them in the sand, bring them over there.
The other complication to moving sea turtle nests, because I worked with relocating nests in Hawaii for hawksbills because there were only 3 nesting females left in the population, and they were nesting in beaches that were eroding. So we had a permit to actually move those nests. But one of the considerations when moving a nest is also that it's the temperature of the nest that indicates the male to female sex ratio. So not knowing enough about the population to make any kind of decision about how many males versus females females want, you kind of want whatever ratio is going to happen in that nest to be that ratio. So regulating temperature becomes very important too. And from what I understand, when they move these nests, they mark the top of the eggs to make sure that the orientations weren't changed. They were very carefully moved, and they were temperature regulated for the entire move and for the entire incubation.
Well, Federal Express had they donated these trucks that everyone was using, and their special air ride, they really did their best. Because if you put them into a plane and it did this, I guess the reptilian eggs, they attach to the side.
Right.
The embryo attaches to the egg, so if you turn the egg, you kill the embryo. So it just, when you take them out of the nest, you have to just take it really carefully and put it down, and like Samantha said, mark the egg.
Wow.
So it's a very painstaking, careful process. I've done it too. They've been building high-rises on the beaches in Florida to move the nests.
With the Exxon Valdez spill that, Prince William Sound is still having some impacts, not all. If you go and you look at their website and you look at the summary of they actually just before the spill came out with a 20-year summary of what they had been finding with all their different studies. And some populations of some species have rebounded just fine. Some really have not. For instance, the herring. And the reason they think the herring didn't rebound is because herring are demersal spawners, which means they lay their eggs on the bottom of the bay, and the oil settled out, and there's a 100% lethal dosage of contact of most hydrocarbon oils and fish eggs, or in this case herring eggs, which they found out later by doing lab tests, because that's what they suspected had happened. But there's an important, I think maybe beneficial difference on our side in this case, and that's that, one, the Gulf of Mexico is a tropical system and not a temperate system. That temperature and that difference in chemistry can make a big deal of difference. You hear a lot about the oil-eating microbes. Those don't exist in Prince William Sound. They do exist here.
Too cold in there.
Right.
I don't know what their average temperature was. Got to be 50 or something.
And the other thing is that the Gulf of Mexico has evolved in the presence of some small amount of background hydrocarbons from the natural seeps. So none of this is to say that this isn't a disaster in orders of magnitude that has to be dealt with and has to be taken very seriously, and that there's going to need to be further funding to start to address the situation. But there are enough differences between this spill and Prince William Sound, which is the one we always seem to compare it to give us a little more hope in this case that maybe it really won't be 20 years.